Okay, let's get workshop C started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Workshop C, Employing Lovers of Integration. My name is Shiyue. I am a research fellow at the Institute and a PhD candidate at the University at Buffalo SUNY. I'm very happy to be moderating this session. So let's begin with some brief housekeeping notes. So we have four wonderful presentations lined up today for Workshop C. Each presentation will be about 8 minutes, and we will hold a Q&A session after all our four presentations. And for those in the audience, please feel free to submit your questions at any time during the Q&A function. I'll be collecting using the Q&A function or chat function as it's showing up right now. I'll be collecting them throughout the session and we'll read them aloud during the Q&A portion at the end. And the theme of today's workshop is Lovers of Integration. Our panelist highlights practical community-based strategies that supports immigrant integration, such as access to driver's lessons, civic participation, language programs, and food security initiatives. Together, these presentations shed light on both the possibilities and the limitations of institutional inclusion, as well as how immigrants themselves are reshaping what integration looks like on the ground. So today we have Lucia Leong and Joana Castro Simonini talking about driver's lessons project. We have Sveta Dobra talking about language programs as gateway to higher education. We have Hazel, Velasco, Palacios talking about food pantries supporting immigrant communities. We also have Kim Irish-Bramble, Marsha Webster, and Sasha Richardson talking about their research on nativity status on voter participation. So without further ado, let's jump into our first presentation today. The title is Driver's Lessons Project, Enhancing Immigrant Integration in Marin County, California, by our presenter Lucia Leong and Joana Castro Simoni. The floor is yours. Please start screen sharing.
Thank you. I am attempting to show the PowerPoint, so please let me know if you don't see it. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Lucia Leon. I am an assistant professor at Dominican University of California, and joining me is Joana Castro Simonini, the Director of Immigration Legal Services at Canal Alliance. And together, we're presenting our driver's license project, a community-engaged collaborative in Marin County. In our brief remarks, we're going to present how our team of advocates utilize community-driven and culturally sensitive strategies to reduce the technological, language, and bureaucratic barriers in the process of obtaining a driver's license for many immigrants. And together, we're going to underscore the value of multi-agency collaboratives in facilitating the implementation of state policies, our efforts in reducing immigrants' complications with law enforcement, and any complications in immigration cases, and expanding social integration for Latino immigrants in Marin. And we look forward to engaging with you in the Q&A discussion. So for those of you unfamiliar, Marin County is just north of San Francisco and is often celebrated for its natural beauty and ranked often among some of the highest income counties in the United States. But this notoriety often masks the historic and racial inequalities in the region, as exemplified by the Canal neighborhood here that you can see is geographically isolated by highways and situated in a semi-industrial zone. And exemplifying these inequalities are, the predominant Latino immigrant community members that live there often face systemic challenges. And so, the Canal community is also, though, tight-knit and often works and organizes to uplift their neighborhood. And in the heart of this neighborhood is the Driver's License Project. And it was initiated in 2023, in the summer of 2023, as a collaborative between Canal Alliance, Dominican University of California, Marin County's Public Defender's Office, and Legal Aid of Marin. Together, we provide support for Marin County residents with limited English skills in the process of obtaining their driver's license, regardless of their immigration status. And so collectively, our main goals, our overarching goals, are to expand immigration and integration efforts in the area. We want to enhance our own organizational capacity to serve immigrants in the community. And we do this specifically by supporting folks through the process of obtaining their license, through community-driven holistic strategies that meet community members where they are and provide individualized one-on-one support. Our main goal is also to provide restorative and preventive strategies, or to innovate these strategies to reduce entry and then further complications for folks to enter the criminal legal system, for example, for driving without a license. And some of our advocates are also immigration attorneys, so part of that effort is also to make sure that there aren't complications in pending immigration cases. Our project takes place at Canal Alliance, one of the organizations that exists here in the Canal neighborhood. Our project started in the summer of 2023, and we just wrapped up our spring semester. And part of our growth has been to shift towards our model being centered around the service learning academic schedule. And this is to accommodate that it's cohorts of students that really provide the one-on-one pivotal support for community members. We will talk a little bit more about what workshops and spaces of support look like for our model, but this is really the heart of the work. And our iterative process of learning and designing has come predominantly from regular community surveys, student reflections, and our team meetings. Briefly, our team consists of 4 key project leads, each representing one of the key organizations of the collaborative. In addition, we have 2 to 3 staff members from each organization with different positions, with some of them here listed for you. And each semester, we have 6 to 12 student advocates that join us for the project, some new, some returning. Something particularly interesting we want to note about our team is that we are all bilingual speakers, so we all are Spanish and English speakers. And many of us share that immigrant experience with community members. Either we're immigrant ourselves or we are family members of immigrant families. Our model has now been shaped to include one workshop at the onset of the semester where we invite community members to come learn about the driver's license project. And we provide, this one workshop. Everyone enrolls in the program who wishes to be a part of the program. And then over the period of 3 months, we have what we call espacios de apoyo, or spaces of support, where community members can come in for drop-in services to work more individual level services with our advocates. And I'm going to turn it over to Joana, who is going to talk to you a little bit about what the workshop entails and what that looks like.
Hi, everyone. So we have 5 stations during the workshop. The first station is the waiting area where we are going to introduce our process, distribute some releases and some other materials that we want the participants to complete or be aware of. The second station is the intake station. We are going to collect demographic information. And then we are going to also check documents to make sure they have all the documents needed to apply for a driver's license. And if they don't have all the documents, then we're going to guide them through the process of obtaining them. One of the major ones is passports. Usually, it's a bit hard to obtain passports depending on the country. I'm going to talk about 3 and 4 in the next slide, but then the 5th station, to me, is the most important one, and the heart of our project is where the participants are going to meet the Dominican University students. The students are going to provide them with a packet, with DMV handbook, sample tests, and they're going to introduce the espacios de apoyo, which are the sessions that we're going to have throughout the semester. They are going to provide one-on-one assistance to the participants. We can go to slide 2, please, or my second slide. Okay, so station 3 is what we call the attorney check-in. And everyone has to go through that station. We wanted to make sure we did not differentiate between folks with status and folks without status, because for this project, we both help folks with the AB60 license in California, so folks who don't have a social security number, and folks who might have some sort of status. So we want to make sure our records do not differentiate between these 2 categories of participants. So everyone needs to go talk to an immigration attorney. We're going to do an immigration screening, and we're going to pretty much talk about the pros and cons of applying for a driver's license with everyone, and provide a referral if necessary, depending on the type of case that the person has, or the type of information the person needs. Station 4 is the DMV liaison. These are people from the public defender's office who have access to the DMV system. They are going to check the DMV system to make sure these people the participants do not have any outstanding fines. See if they're in the system or not in the system yet. And if they are already in the system, figure out why and guide them through the process of figuring out what needs to be done to clear any fines or anything like that. I think I'm good.
Thank you, Joana. Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute. Okay, so as Joana said, we enroll folks in the workshops who want to be part of the project. And then the bulk of the work really happens at these drop-in spaces where folks work with advocates either on a one-on-one basis or in these larger peer group supports as shown here in the photos. And this is really where we address a lot of the barriers. And sometimes this can be, one whole session can be helping folks navigate email, how to create an email account, how to, figure out how to access DMV appointments, and others can be practicing, common phrases for their driving exam, for example. So these are really adaptable spaces where we meet community members where they're at. And we also draw on our advocate skill sets and adapt. So for example, one of the growths from this project has been the increasing need for community members to have an advocate with them when they go to the DMV. And so some of our advocates from their organizations now will co-schedule appointments where they can accompany members, community members to the DMV during their exams. We don't have time to sort of go over a lot of our community members' case studies, but we wanted to at least tell you a little bit about what we've learned from them. And to date, we've had 166 community members participate in the project. To Freddie's example here of his ability to gain a driver's license and how it has helped him with his confidence to be a more active participant in his community and also to work towards his license or his business license, excuse me. And so what community members tell us is that there are a lot of transferable skills that they gain in this one-on-one support that then they're able to take with them for their daily lives or for employment opportunities. There is a sense of empowerment and greater confidence as they feel that there's community support, there's organizational support, there's advocate support. And the access to a driver's license also opens new social and economic opportunities for immigrants in the region. And so lastly, we wanted to share that, our collective strategies really help us increase our own individual ability to support immigrant social integration through our organizations. This means that our organization's capacity and funding is also further increased. For example, we started an MOU together to also help us with sustainability beyond any one particular member of our team, and to also help us think through replicability and what that could look like if we want this work to grow in other regions. That also doesn't mean that we are not without limitation. Funding continues to be a major source of limitation for us. Each organization has gained individual grants to help with this work, but we are, still in the process of seeking a grant to help facilitate the entire process. We also realize that we need new partnerships and new relationships. For example, Joana mentioned the passport issue. So we realize relationships with consulates from some of the regions of Latin America that we predominantly serve would be really helpful, or our relationships with local DMV offices. And lastly, which I'm sure we'll engage in the discussion, like many of us doing this work, we are faced with political and local context changes that shifts the nature of the work, and sometimes in very unprecedented ways. And that particularly happened to us this semester with the new administration as we're thinking about the impact of what this means for immigrant communities in our county. And so we'd be happy to talk more about that in the Q&A. But thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to the rest of the panels.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. And next up, we're moving to our second presentation.
start the presentation. So can you confirm if you can hear me well and see the slides? Okay, perfect. So
Yes.
good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hazel Velasco Palacios. I'm an international student and a PhD candidate here at Penn State, and I'm studying rural sociology and women's gender and sexuality studies. And today I will be presenting on exploring the role of food pantries as spaces for immigrant integration. And this study is part of a larger research project on the Emergency Food Network here in Pennsylvania, conducted as part of my work with Drs. Christina Brent and Dr. Justine Niedelman. So just as an introduction, in recent years or the last decades, rural areas have been emerging as new immigrant destinations, and these places are becoming the first or second destination for migrant workers and refugees, largely due to the potential economic opportunities they offer in sectors like agriculture, food processing, and manufacturing. For example, as shown in the figure here, we can see how places that have not historically been considered typical immigrant destinations like Pennsylvania are experiencing the highest changes in their migrant populations. However, the literature also shows that integration into these areas comes with challenges. There is often limited capacity in institutions like schools, healthcare clinics, and other social services to adapt to a more diverse population. Migrants also face other challenges in these places, such as securing affordable and appropriate housing and obtaining a stable and safe employment. These factors contribute to their vulnerability to issues like food insecurity. For instance, research by the National Immigrant Law Center has found that immigrant communities are 1.28 times more likely to experience food insecurity compared to US-born counterparts. Given these challenges, it is important to us to explore how or if places like food pantries and soup kitchens in rural areas are adapting to serve immigrant communities effectively. In addition to examining how food pantries are adapting or if they are to serve these communities, we are also interested in exploring where these places can actually function as hubs for integration, for community integration. And Oldenburg's work on third spaces, it's helpful here because it highlights how the importance of such spaces for community integration and networking. So quickly, third spaces are neither home nor work, but they provide a neutral ground where people can gather, socialize, and build community ties. And although there is limited research on third spaces in rural communities, existing studies indicate that these spaces are equally essential in rural settings as in urban spaces. So within the framework of our research, we consider that food pantries and soup kitchens are places where people spend a significant amount of time, often more than 30 minutes, and this makes them potential third spaces where immigrants can not only receive essential services such as food, but also engage with others and build networks. Thus, we wanted to investigate whether these food pantries and soup kitchens can not only adapt to their services, but if they can also be catalysts for immigrant integration in these new immigrant destinations. So our guiding research questions, broadly speaking, are like, how are these food pantries adapting and what challenges do they face? But today for this presentation, I'm going to be focusing mostly on the second question, and it is, can food pantries serve as third places for immigrant community integration? So, as I mentioned before, this study is a part of a larger research project, and it's an examination of emergency food supply and distribution in rural Pennsylvania conducted for the Center for Rural PA. And you can find the whole document and the whole report in the Central for Rural Pennsylvania website. But we use a mixed method approach, which included interviews with food bank coordinators, food pantry coordinators, and service recipients. And these interviews were conducted between the summer of 2023 and 2024. In addition to the interviews, I also conducted over 300 hours of participant observation as a volunteer in a food pantry in Pennsylvania that primarily serves the Latino immigrant community. And the analysis of the data involved transcribing the audio recordings, writing memos for each transcript, and then we developed a code book and coded the transcripts using NVivo. with a second coder reviewing each transcript to ensure their correct reliability. One important limitation of our sample is that we had limited input from immigrant service recipients. Therefore, for the results, I mostly speak from the interviews with food banks and food pantry coordinators, and I focus more on like the structural issues that we found rather than like individual experiences. So for the time limitations, I'm going to focus mostly on the question two, as I said. So we found that some food pantries are emerging as vital community hubs that extend beyond traditional roles of addressing food insecurity. They are actively facilitating community integration and personal development for immigrant populations. These pantries serve not just as food distribution center, but as dynamic spaces where immigrants can engage in a range of activities that foster personal growth and also social capital. Some pantries offer classes, English classes, technical skills, provide tools to improve language abilities, and also help with job prospects. We also saw that while waiting in line, which can last anywhere from 1 to 2 hours, individuals engage in conversations and form connections with community members, building a network of support and friendship that is important in a new place. And some pantries also organize cultural festivities and family-oriented events, such as fishing, hiking, and community gardening projects. And we found that these activities not only provide leisure and relaxation time, but also foster a sense of belonging and community among participants in the new space that they are living. Moreover, food pantries often become points of access to essential information on services such as healthcare, migration assistance, financial literacy, housing, childcare, etc. But however, despite the positive role that many of these food pantries play, we've also found that it's important to acknowledge that food pantries and soup kitchens can sometimes reinforce the stigma and stereotypes, especially regarding immigrants' families and reliance on welfare. And when we ask if they serve, for example, when we ask if they serve immigrant communities and how the pantry are adapting, one of our pantry participants responded, well, there is still very limited immigrant community here, but it's also entirely English speaking. There are not many changes. This is just started to change, but the Lucia school had more native Arabic speakers than Spanish now, because there was one extended Palestinian family that came with cousins, so that's not an issue yet, but it will be, but it's not yet. So we still saw some hesitancy from some places to start adapting their services. So I can see that I'm already in my 8th, and I'm running out of time, but just some key findings. We found a great potential that food pantries can serve as immigrant integration hubs, but also we found that the food pantries in areas with larger immigrant populations already are better adapted to meet these diverse needs. And they are often more proactive, offering cultural appropriate foods, creating inclusive environments. In contrast, areas with smaller immigrant populations, the adaptations are less pronounced and heavily dependent on individual initiatives, which often leads to inconsistent on services and requirements from the food pantry. So thank you. I think I'm going to end there, and happy to answer questions or chat more about this today in the Q&A.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Hazel. Let's see. Next up, we have Sveta in the workshop right now? I think our tech team is working on her screen sharing. So while we wait for Sveta, Ken, do you want to go ahead and start your presentation? Thank you so much. We have Ken, and Sasha and Marsha. Please go ahead. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Webster won't be able to join us today, but we are happy for the opportunity to come and share some of our research. We aren't a perfect fit for the other panels because we don't actually have a, direct project, so to speak, that engages. But nonetheless, we think talking about voter participation and participation in the broader electoral process is an integral part of this conversation. And so we hope that you find what we have to present interesting and insightful. All right, we're going to try and go quickly because of the time limitations. Sasha, you want to advance it? Yeah, so we decided that we were looking at the differences basically between naturalized citizens and natural born or native born, excuse me, citizens. The naturalized citizen population is an increasingly important part of the electorate. As of 2024, it's estimated, and the Pew and Brookings have slightly different accountings for this, but somewhere between 10 and 13% of the electorate in 2024 was made up of naturalized citizens. And that's a growing population with an average of about 700,000 citizens being naturalized every year. Despite that, and just to give you a sense of how significant this population could be, 7.4 million immigrants, or about 33.6% of the non-citizen population, are actually eligible to be naturalized, but have not necessarily done so yet. Go ahead, Sasha, next one. Naturalization rates have also been increasing over the past decades. So the naturalization rate, which is the rate at which, well, I guess that's has increased from 48% in 1995 to about 61% in 2011. And we're still working on the numbers, more recent numbers in terms of what that rate is. It varies by state in terms of the rate at which green card holders or other migrant groups are attaining their citizenship. So Florida is at about 82.7%, West Virginia 82.1%, Vermont 81.8%, and New Jersey 81.7%, those being the highest rates of naturalization. The states with the lowest rates of naturalization are Arkansas, New Mexico, Indiana, and Kansas at 65.3, 66.4, 70.1, and 70.2, respectively. It's also noteworthy that, as you know, this population is not equally distributed across states. More than 55% of all naturalized citizens live in just 4 states: California, Florida, New York, and Texas. Go ahead, Sasha. Prior to the late 90s, well, I'm not going to do much of this lit review. I'll just suffice it to say that this is an understudied area in terms of looking at what exactly the profile is, first of all, of naturalized citizens as members of the electorate, but also in terms of a comparative analysis between behavior of naturalized citizens versus native-born citizens. Sasha, you can skip forward. All right. Actually, go back real quick just to that one. All right. This quotation, I'm taking the time to share it because it sums up what is a recurring theme in those of us who have looking at it. So taken together, this research suggests that nativity status is an important determinant of voting behavior. Despite growth in the foreign-born population and the increased attention paid to immigration in American politics, naturalized citizens are not capitalizing on their rights as citizens to participate in the electoral process. In fact, they were less likely to do so in most recent elections than a decade ago. Of course, that was written in 2008 by Christian File. Jump forward a little bit, Sasha. Okay, so what we did in our research is we looked at a couple of things. First, we wanted to create a profile of what the naturalized voting citizens look like, or what the naturalized population looked like. And then second of all, we wanted to test theories such as those put forward by File and Bass and Casper, both of which were done 2 decades ago. So we wanted to test whether or not things had changed, whether or not there were improvements in terms of participation of naturalized citizens. Again, because of restraints in time, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. We saw some patterns which remained the same, including that women tended to participate at a higher rate than men did, and that this was true both for the foreign-born and the native-born populations. But we are still seeing relatively low rates of turnout for both in terms of age groups. So citizens tended to participate at higher rates, with our and sort of decreasing, I guess, as you went down in age groups. So with 18 to 29 having the lowest rates of participation. Sasha, let's jump on. And Sasha will talk a little bit about this in terms of the regressions in terms of education and income. Again, the patterns are relatively consistent, with the exception of that middle group, the associate degree in some college. And I think we'll come back and talk about that hopefully in the Q&A. In general, by increasing in terms of education, that increased your likelihood to participate in the electoral process. And similar patterns can be seen in terms of income. Household conversation, again, the patterns are relatively consistent between native-born and foreign-born, with those who were in married couple households having, in this case, higher rates of participation. We are going to focus significantly on those who said no in our general Q&A, I guess, part of this presentation. So I'm just drawing your attention to the bar at the very top in terms of those who did not vote. And you see that 61% of foreign-born or naturalized citizens who were in married households or tended not to vote, which we thought was significantly noteworthy. All right, Ash. All right, so in terms of reasons for not registering, and of course registration, which will come up in Sasha's piece, is super important because it's a necessary precursor to actually voting. You see that foreign-born or naturalized citizens had a higher rate of not registering to vote than their native counterparts. Reasons provided are interesting and of particular interest for me. We can't get into all of them. Is so we're looking at essentially the third bar in this diagram, if you will, is the 24% of naturalized citizens who did not register because they didn't think that they were eligible to vote, and the 18% who also said they didn't register because they didn't know where or how to register. And in terms of our this discussion points, I think those two are really two statistics that the greatest difference. Oh, I only have 30 seconds remaining. Okay, so Sasha, I'm probably going to end up squeezing you out of this. Sasha, just jump forward, and if you can, just in a minute, talk about your regressions. We don't need to talk about the methodology here.
So I guess really quickly, our logistic regression results or models confirm many of the patterns that Dr. Irish-Bramble just discussed for both native-born citizens, registration, age, income, and education were all positively correlated with voting. And for naturalized citizens, registration again had the strongest impact, but the length of time someone has lived in the US also played a significant role, and this suggests that civic engagement among immigrants builds over time. So looking more closely, so for both groups, like was mentioned, registration is the strongest predictor, which is expected because it is a necessary precursor to voting. You also see that the year showed a negative correlation, which is consistent with voting patterns since 2020 was a presidential election and then 2022 was a midterm. For naturalized citizens, the length of residence at current home was one of the top predictors for voting, and that makes sense as a greater feeling of stability often brings stronger community ties and familiarity with the political process. And just really quickly, of course, our analysis had some limitations. First, there is an imbalance in sample sizes between native-born citizens as the native-born citizens, are significantly overrepresented in the data, which can skew comparisons a bit. And also a lack of longitudinal data as we're working with just cross-sectional snapshots from 2020 and 2022 voting participation. So a longer time frame would help us understand better how these voting patterns would evolve over time. So yes, that was really quickly the regression results. So here are implications and findings. You want to cover that, Darsh? Oh, you're muted. Oh, we don't have any time, I think.
Yeah, if you could wrap up really quickly, we'd really appreciate it. Sorry for the time limit.
We'll stop right now. We'll stop.
Yeah, this is just our last slide. So our initial findings suggested gender, education, income, and length of stay at residence are the strong positive predictors of voter participation. Length of time in the country is a positive predictor of voter participation. Household size and labor force participation are negative predictors of voter participation, probably because of logistical barriers or of competing responsibilities. And as we said, we already found a decrease from 2020 to 2022, which is consistent. All right, thank you very much. We apologize for going a little over.
Thank you. Last but not least, Sveta, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Sure. I'm going to try to be fast, and I think
Thank you.
also, yeah.
Here we go.
Okay, I think now, yeah, it works. Okay. So yeah, I will cut several slides most likely. Let me know if you can't see. Okay, I think you can see my screen now. So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Sveta, and I'm a PhD candidate in sociology at the University at Albany. And I'm going to share some findings from my research on language programs and their critical role as gateways to higher education for immigrant and refugee students. I started a lot of this research as an immigration integration fellow with the Immigration Integration Center at the Rockefeller Institute of Government a couple of summers ago. My research topic at the time was a little bit broader. The research question was on the role and support that higher education institutions could offer immigrant and refugee students. And to collect data, I spoke with university administrators and faculty from institutions across the US. And the topic that came up again and again was about the importance of language programs for the integration of students on campus, but also into the wider community. So today I'm going to share just a little bit about this part of my research. Okay, so what the research and practice is discovering is that language programs serve far more purposes than simply teaching English. They function as comprehensive entry points that facilitate academic integration, build social capital, and support identity transformation for immigrant and refugee students. I'm going to explore how language programs can be structured to maximize their impact on immigrant and refugee student success in higher education settings. Just very quickly about why that's important. So language barriers represent one of the major obstacles to higher education access for immigrant and refugee populations. According to the UNHCR, globally, only about 6% of the refugee population accesses higher education. In terms of the US context, immigrants and children of immigrants now constitute nearly 1/3 of all higher education students nationwide, which is a significant increase from just 1/5 2 decades ago. And even more locally, in certain states, like New York State, immigrant background students make up almost half of all students. This dramatic growth emphasizes the urgent need for effective language programs that can support these students' transition to and success in higher education. Language programs serve as critical bridges to degree granting programs. Well-designed language programs function as precursors to enrollment in degree programs, creating pathways that might otherwise remain closed to immigrant and refugee students. And beyond basic language acquisition, these programs importantly familiarize students with academic expectations in the US. They help students develop what some researchers term academic culture skills, the unwritten rules and practices that govern academic success in a new educational context. For example, citation practices, discussion participation expectations, or instructor-student relationship. On a personal note, I myself came on a student visa as an international student, and my experience, my educational context in my home country was very different. So for me, all those three elements were something I had to get used to in the US context. I'm going to talk about this slide, but skip the next one, I think. So language classes also function as powerful builders of social capital. Language learning environments expose refugee students to social networks and connections essential for college preparation. These networks ultimately increase what some researchers have identified as academic success and retention factors. When students form a relationship through language programs, they gain access to informal knowledge sharing, emotional support, and practical assistance navigating complex institutional systems. The University of Colorado offers an exemplary model with its peer language practice groups. These sessions pair immigrant students with domestic students, creating reciprocal learning opportunities, while also building cross-cultural relationships that often extend beyond the language classroom into broader academic and social contexts. And possibly one of the most important impacts of language programs is their role in identity transformation. Language acquisition helps, for example, refugee students transition from seeing themselves primarily as refugees to seeing themselves as university students, which is a shift with significant psychological, but also academic and integration benefits. I would like to just briefly highlight an innovative model called International Pathway to Academic Success, or IPAS. And this program is a good example of a comprehensive approach to language learning that directly supports academic integration. And this program is offered at a range of universities in New York State as well as outside. I spoke with someone at Western Kentucky University who explained how that program is run at that university. And IPAS there offers general education courses specifically designed for non-native speakers. Rather than creating a separate track, these courses fulfill core university requirements while incorporating language support. The program is explicitly described as non-remedial, but rather academically rigorous with integrated language components. So importantly, students don't feel like they're wasting time or falling behind in any way. They are getting regular credits for participating in this program, very much tailored to their needs. I think I'm just going to skip to my recommendations for institutions. So based on my research, I have several concrete steps for institutions seeking to strengthen their language programs. First, develop comprehensive language programs that go beyond basic English as a new language instruction to include academic discourse, discipline-specific terminology, and cultural navigation skills. Second, create clear pathways from language programs to degree enrollment with intentional overlap to ensure smooth transition. Third, integrate cultural orientation components within language instruction to address the social and cultural aspects of academic integration. And last but definitely not least in terms of importance, build peer mentorship components into language learning environments. As one university administrator noted, students trust other students and students figure out ways to make things work. This peer-to-peer navigator approach has been fantastically successful in supporting immigrant students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. That wraps up our presentation, bring us to the end of our session. Leslie, thank you again to all of our presenters for their wonderful work and to the audiences for your participation. And yeah, I want to apologize for the tech issues. And unfortunately, we've run out of time for the Q&A portion, but but our presenters have their emails listed. So if you want to reach out to any of them, please feel free to do so via their work email. We're deeply grateful for all of you for sharing such thoughtful and powerful work, and we appreciate the community strategies you have brought to this conversation, as well as trends in the voter participation, allowing us to think more deeply about what integration looks like, especially given the increasing complexities at the federal level and maybe local level, which we don't really have time to talk about today. Thank you again for your contributions. And now we are returning to our main conference room. Please click leave room, and we're going back to the main conference room for closing remarks. Thank you very much.